So the next session will be moderated by Professor Yukari Takamura. She's an expert of international law and environmental law. She has been engaged in the UNFPCC discussion, and now the Vice Chair of Science Council of Japan. She is on so many boards and advisory committees of our country. Professor Takamura. Okubo-san, thank you for your very kind introduction. First of all, this would be the final panel, the top leaders session. By the way, at the Institute for Future Initiative at Tokyo University, we are also a member of JCI. As the moderator, first of all, I would like to discuss the background as to why we have decided to convene this panel. So with the typhoons, a series of disasters in Japan, this is no longer a risk of the future. It is today's risk and tomorrow's risk already. So how much are we causing climate changes, including typhoons, because of our emission from our daily lives? And to indicate that, to visualize by science is the key point. The sixth assessment report of IPCC, and indeed, you're waiting for the final integrated report, but according to the AR6, because of rising temperature, the climate change that we actually feel day by day, the change is going to be more serious. The change will be even more violent. Or a massive torrential rain that happens only once in 10 years, only once in 50 years. Such disasters will become more frequent. So under this backdrop, last year in Glasgow, UK, a COP26 was convened. The Paris Accord has the target, and out of that, it should be significantly below 2 degrees, and as an effort to keep it up to 1.5 degrees Celsius, to suppress the rise only up to 1.5 degrees is discussed. But unfortunately, if we think about the goals of 2030, Japan has made the goal a bit more ambitious, but still, in order to keep the rise up to 1.5%, we know that that is not achievable. In that regard, it is an urgent matter to accelerate our efforts, and I do not need to tell you, but February 24, Russia invaded into Ukraine, and because of that, energy supply has become uncertain. Energy prices have shot up. I mean, energy was always expensive even before invasion into Ukraine, but because of energy, the circumstance is changing. So we are trying to graduate from fossil fuel. We are trying to do away with fossil fuel to change to clean energy. It would be a motivation for us, but then we have to ensure energy supply will not be disrupted. Already, now it's only 3 weeks from now, but COP27 will take place soon. So we have invited Japanese businesses, local government authorities, what actions they are taking in terms of climate change and in face of energy crisis. How do they intend to overcome this energy crisis is what I would like to talk about. So just beside myself, Mr. Morita, President of NEC. May I ask you first? Thank you. We are an IT company, and both hardware, software, and services is our business, which means, of course, our company emits gases, and within our supply chain, of course, there are lots of emissions. In terms of global warming, for the humankind, this is a massive challenge. So far, it was a hidden cost, not visible, but now the cost is becoming exposed. So how to overcome this challenge? In a certain sense, it could be a business opportunity. And for that matter, it could be a massive opportunity. I mean, there will be lots of capitals moving around. Money will circulate. We did have a goal by 2050, including the supply chain, to go carbon neutral by 2050, including the supply chain. We had already announced such a plan before. But more recently, climate pledge, we have decided to participate. And by 2040, so we have decided to go carbon neutral 10 years earlier than 2050, by 2040. Because we are in the ICT, information technology area, compared to other science, chemical, or iron and steel, compared to other industry sectors, relatively speaking, probably it's not that difficult for NEC to reduce emission, but still, to achieve by 2040 rather than 2050, we shall have to make a massive investment. So by accelerating, reaching the achievement, we want to accumulate the knowledge and then capitalize and leverage such knowledge into our business. That should be an advantage for us. As we make such efforts in terms of our organization, they are data centers, factory, and plants. To make these facilities green, we have already announced our plans. And in terms of finance, STB-linked bonds have been issued. It was a surprise for us. It was oversubscribed. More than 100 billion yen of financing was executed with our SBI bonds, SBT bonds. And by verifying and assessing the infrastructure, whether that can be used in the future, so-called circular economy, it can be realized. We have a plant, factory in Abiko, by solar or with storage battery, and using the cloud system and in a remote way by managing the data remotely, surplus power can be sold to third parties. So this is a resource aggregation business. So first of all, we try with our own factories and plants, and the positive outcome will be demonstrated to other parties. So we shall make the cloud infrastructure open so that other companies can also use our facilities. Thank you. Thank you. As you mentioned, not only your factories or offices, but the supply chain emission by 2040, you are targeting net zero, 2040, not 2050. And you said it is a business opportunity. You are engaged in various activities. Thank you very much. And I shall ask you further questions later. And next, Daiwa House Asset Management, President Tsuchida. Thank you for the introduction. I am the president of Daiwa House Asset Management. I am Tsuchida. Our company, we have the Daiwa House REIT, which is listed. We have the investment organization. We have private placed fund. We are an asset manager of such assets. In terms of our asset, the listed REIT, Daiwa House REIT, 900 billion yen is the AUM, and 100 billion the private placement. So a total of 1 trillion yen of real estate asset is managed. The word REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust, was referred to. Literally, it is an investment trust of real estate properties. The point is, we invite investors and financial institutions to invest or extend loans. That capital is invested into real estate, and the rental income, the returns will be distributed as dividends. That is the mechanism of REIT. The characteristic of REIT is most of the return will be distributed, which means corporate income tax will be exempt, which is one advantage. At the moment, there are listed 61 stocks that are listed on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. The real estate are for office purposes, or in our case, half of the facilities for distribution, commercial facilities, or residential houses, hotels. Different types of real estate properties are listed. In terms of the asset size for the entire REIT, 21 trillion yen, market cap 16 trillion yen. That is the size of the REIT market. As we engage with the domestic and foreign investors, foreign investor accounts for 25%. From a few years ago, through investor relations activities, efforts regarding ESG is the topic of our engagement. In particular, European investors, many of them just conclude the meeting only with ESG questions. In the case of our company, we are prepared to emphasize our ESG effort. And the Sustainability Office, this is directly under the President. On a monthly basis, there is a committee organized. We have a sustainability promoting division. At this committee, we have external experts as well. We receive comments and advices, and we are engaged in such discussions related to climate challenge on a daily basis. As an asset manager, what contribution can we make? We are not a manufacturer or an architectural company, so what can we do in terms of asset management? And I will be prepared to introduce some examples. The first for a J-REIT is the first example. Our remuneration, the revenue for an asset manager from the REIT, there are the remuneration that we earn. So in this remuneration, what we earn, either asset or net income multiplied by a certain percentage was what we received. And this rate, by reducing some of the coefficient, a sustainability-linked remuneration has been introduced. What do I mean? For example, GHG emission reduction, or CDP, and other external assessment, or GRESB, in terms of real estate, like GRESB, depending on the scores or the assessment, the remuneration will be determined. So that would demonstrate the commitment of ourselves as an asset manager. Reduce the rate, the coefficient, then 40 million to 50 million yen will be saved. If that can be reallocated to environmental efforts. For example, the building eco-friendly recognition, including CASB, green building accreditation bells, by using the saved money for labeling or certification or attestation, the value of the buildings will rise. So out of the saved 50 million, it can be reallocated to positive purposes, and we will receive the remuneration from the REIT. Another point is, this is the world's first. Mr. Morita of NEC mentioned this. Annual performance type of linked bond. In May of this year, we issued as the global first as asset manager. So annual performance means that year after year, it is a variable loan. And where does the money come from? It is the CDP, assessment and evaluation, and the loan spread will be determined according to the CDP assessment. For example, A list of CDP, we were fortunate to be included in A list. So if the company is in A list, a 2.5 basis point will be reduced in terms of the spread. But if the rating is lower by 1 notch, if it is A minus, then the rate will be topped up by 1 basis, for example. So in that way, between investors and ourselves, we are demonstrating our commitment to dealing with climate change. So this is the first in the world. So this is another example. And the properties that we acquire, we wish to acquire eco-friendly buildings. And last year, this was the first for REIT, but ZEB, zero emission building, net ZEB, we acquired. So energy saving and energy creation. With solar panels, energy will be created by the building and also by saving their use. In balance, it should be net zero building. And as the first for a REIT, we acquired the ZEB building. Thank you. Thank you very much. I was so impressed with what you discussed. Mr. Morita also mentioned the so-called sustainability, including climate change perspective, that has a direct impact onto your finance, including bonds and loans. How to acquire capital is important. Shareholder assessment and the financial institutions' assessment is also changing. I wish to talk about this later again. Thank you so much. And next, from Pacific Power, the President, Ms. Gozu, energy supplier.
Thank you very much. Gozu from Pacific Power. I have some cowlicks in my hair. Two very famous companies have spoken, and followed by Pacific Power, hardly a company that perhaps you know. And so let me introduce the company. Our parent company is Pacific Consultants, a construction consulting company. This perhaps is not so well known either, but the central government and local government jobs, most of these are undertaken by this company, and we are 100% wholly owned subsidiary. In 2015, the company was established. And from the aspect of energy, regional promotion is what we want to contribute to. And that is the intent with which the company was established. Most of our business is such that we cooperate with local governments, and we co-finance to create energy companies in the region. And we support the business operations of the company. And that is what we do. And nationwide, we have 15 such companies which we support. Power supply is provided, but these companies are such that initially to public facilities, power is supplied. And because of this and other reasons, local government, the new power utility, the local government new power utility is what these companies are referred to as. Public facilities, electric power supply is used to solidify the management base. But this is not a company just built for this purpose. Presently, decarbonization, energy conservation, or solar power generation, renewable energy. We are positive about initiatives in these areas. With regard to response to climate change, I think what is important is the central government waving the flag to make sure that everyone tries hard. But there's a bottom-up approach which is effort which is necessary. You have to have intent. When I say bottom-up approach, that's individuals and regions. But each and individual going in disparate directions would lead us to nowhere. So a certain amount of financial power and authority is necessary. And so therefore, a local government inevitably would become the unit for these endeavors. But the local government alone cannot manage things smoothly. So the local government, new power utility, this is a public-private company. So to establish these companies to undertake and promote the decarbonization of the community, I believe such movements are required. And so that's why we are engaging in such business. These companies are such that there's a lot of government subsidies provided. With the local government, we leverage this money. And with local companies, we work together to promote the decarbonization. And I believe this is ideal. And so that being the case, with different local governments, we are working on them to do the kinds of things that I described. We're working on them, but 15 companies have been established. We're not such an old company, we're a young company, but we are very, very busy. So the world's needs are there, I believe. That is what I keenly feel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gozu. The Pacific consultant, I have had some engagement with your parent company to create an energy company for the local community. There are lots of consultation, including the provision of expertise. In particular, in the case of Japan's decarbonization, of course, there must be an accumulation of decarbonization effort in each and every local community, and indeed, your company is supporting such little effort. So just as you mentioned, regional, local decarbonization, that would be crucial for our country to decarbonize. Today, we have the mayor of Kawasaki City, Mr. Fukuda. You already have a very ambitious goal, and you are the pioneer of decarbonization.
Thank you very much, Fukuda from Kawasaki City. Kawasaki City, there are 20 cabinet designated cities. We're sixth in terms of population, and the population is still growing. It's an unusual region. So amidst these circumstances, among the cabinet designated cities, we are emitting CO2. And this is due to the industrial structure. When you think of Kawasaki, you think of steel, iron and steel, chemicals and oil. And so that's why we emit a lot of CO2. How do we decarbonize our economy? For our city, this is a battle which for our own survival. And so we have a sense of crisis. We have to do something about this. Kawasaki City is such that because we have the industrial structure that we have, CO2 emissions, the source is 76% is from industry. Compared to other regions, we have by far a larger percentage of industry. On the average, I think 45% is industry. So this is a challenge of the industrial city. And we have to succeed. Unless we succeed, no other city can succeed. That is a sense of mission that we feel. And this year in March, we adopted the global warming prevention promotion plan, 50% reduction by 2030. And so this is not in broad terms. A breakdown is given in terms of industry, commercial and residential, and city hall, several percentage. So that this is not a pie in the sky. We are very specific with regard to these goals. And so specific goals, there are 40 items of these, and we are promoting these. And an important project, there are 5 important projects which we have espoused. One of this is what Gozu-san mentioned, the regional new power utility and the establishment thereof. And next year we will have one such utility. Regional new power utility is such that these tend to be small local governments, but local government will invest 51%, and it's a large-scale project, and I think this is very unusual in Japan. So the regional new utility, we hope that we will be using PPM models, and local governments and local businesses, we want to supply power to such entities. And as for the decarbonization, leading cities, Kawasaki City has been designated as a leading city in terms of decarbonization as well. Kawasaki City in the middle of Kawasaki City is a station called Mizunokji, Nambu lines and Tokisen cross here, and centered around this area, in a small area, a decarbonization action, Mizunokji, has been initiated. Kawasaki City and the regional large companies have gotten together so that 38 businesses comprise this project. And in a concentrated way, decarbonization efforts will be forwarded so that this is visible to the citizens. We have started such efforts. If we succeed here, in the neighboring areas, we believe that we'll be able to expand. So in a focused way, we want to concentrate our efforts in the area that I just mentioned. As a mayor, I'm a mayor, but at the same time, I wear another hat. There are 700 cities, and all of these cities belong to a non-life insurance mutual aid association. And in East and West, in all parts of Japan, local governments have a lot of assets, but because of typhoons and earthquakes, all are damaged. And there's an increase of this damage. And so as an insurance company, it puts them in a difficult position. They have to increase premiums. Otherwise, it's very difficult. If we look at examples throughout the nation, here is another crisis looming. So it's important for the government to take action, but non-state actors, ourselves, so local governments and cities must work together with companies to proceed. I think this is increasingly important going forward. So we want to take different approaches. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fukuda. You mentioned about the non-life insurance. It applies to insurance, and when disasters occur, the local government authorities will have to deal with a disaster outcome in the front line. The citizens, the residents of the city, mayor, village, of course, have to be protected. But when it comes to climate change, it really is such an urgent matter right in front of us. Thank you very much. We have received the initial comments. As was mentioned at the outset, there is the energy crisis and, of course, climate crisis occurring. And the energy crisis, whether it be material or food, it is impacting our daily lives as well as corporate management. Under this backdrop, of course, you are facing some difficulties and challenges. I would like to ask you for the challenges, the difficulties that you are facing, but all the four panelists discussed that you are all very willing to take countermeasures. You are very proactive, not hesitating. But any challenges that you can tell us? Or if you are facing any difficulties, how are you trying to overcome? Maybe starting with President Morita? Of course, energy price is rising. We have supply chain disruption. Under this situation, how to sustain economic viability? Businesses has to be profitable, must be able to survive. So to survive the transition, iron and steel or chemical enterprises, I have communicated with top management of other sectors, and including the small modular reactors of nuclear power, how to transition in reality, how to survive the transition. I think that would be the crucial challenge. In addition to that, the ultimate goal, what is it? CO2 emission has to be reduced, and as Mayor Fukuda discussed, what I am personally interested in is infrastructure. Infrastructure might be destroyed by disaster. A forest and wood might be destroyed, or because they become obsolete, all of a sudden infrastructure might collapse or get lost. Then we have to repair. Together with the city of Kawasaki, by using digital technology, disaster preparedness agreement has been concluded between ourselves and Kawasaki. Maybe you might be aware, but the impact of disaster on infrastructure and rebuilding or repair, that's account for more than 10% of the CO2 emission. The destroyed infrastructure and rebuilding, that's account for more than 10% of the CO2 emission. And in Japan or the United States, infrastructure becomes so old and disasters becoming more frequent. So this ratio of infrastructure destruction CO2 emission will only increase, it will not go down. Therefore, how to extend the life of infrastructure, how to make them disaster resilient by wisdom or with technology, how can we make our infrastructure more strong, resilient to disasters? Satellite, sensors are the technology that we provide, and there are projects of smart cities. In such areas, because Japan is a disaster-prone country, we can demonstrate which projects are successful, and then we can share our experience to the global community. Thank you. Indeed, going carbon neutral starts from power generation and transportation, housing, residential, and to be resilient to disaster, the existing infrastructure has to be reinforced and make them smart or digitalized. So to make the infrastructure smart so that it would emit less global warming gases. And the next person I plan to invite is indeed a party who is engaged in infrastructure management. That is Mr. Tsuchida. What you might be doing. So within this backdrop of energy crisis, what are the difficulties and how do you intend to overcome the difficulties? So we manage assets like real estate. Many of them are distribution facilities. And the distribution facilities, there are two major categories. One is that the tenant will use the spaces, or it could be multiple tenant use. It is called a sort of multiple type, multiple tenant use distribution facilities. We own one tenant distribution facility. In this circumstance, if we try to understand the actual energy consumption, it is very difficult to verify. This would fall under scope 3, but within scope 1 and 2, compared to that, scope 3 probably is expected to account for 15 times larger emission compared to scope 1 and 2. Therefore, our challenge is how to grasp the actual emission in scope 3 and reduce. We must ask the companies to provide consumption data to us. A green lease contract is one method. In the past, data related to energy consumption, we could not ask it to be provided, but awareness has been rising, and therefore, by asking for the provision of information, we can contribute by analyzing and propose that it be replaced with LED or placing solar panels on the facilities. We can make suggestions, and we can contribute to the reduction of emissions by our tenants. So the green lease contract, that accounts for more than 90% of our lease contracts. It is rising. So by receiving data, what we can contribute, we would like to make proactive proposals. Thank you. Thank you. May I go back to President Morita once again? We have just heard by President Tsuchida, so digital technology to access data, and based on the data, actions can be taken. That is why data is important. And you mentioned extending the life of the infrastructure to enhance resilience of infrastructure. How can digitalization contribute to extend the life of infrastructure and to make them resilient to disasters? Of course, those are the expected effects. And in addition to that, within the so-called Scope 3, it applies to ourselves, but 90% of the emission is Scope 3, also for ourselves. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, and beyond. It's really difficult to do something. Traceability would be one difficulty. In terms of ultimate goal, for example, renewable energy generated power, can that be traced? Yes, technology is available to trace whether our suppliers are using renewable, but in terms of data format, how to share the data, rules making, that is very important, which is absent at the moment. International standardization are ongoing, but there is no ultimate framework. JETA, Japan Electronic Industry Technology Association, Green Times Digital, a consortium has been made, and JETA is working on formatting or standardization so that the data can be shared by leveraging ICT. So it's called a Visualization Working Group, and we are also taking the lead. In the case of Japan or JETA, if it's only Japan or one industry association alone, it's going nowhere. So how to make our efforts into global rule will be important. And about the credibility, integrity of the data, and the traceability, how to ensure traceability. And then by sharing the data, what will be the benefits to all the participants? And of course, the data has to be protected once we receive. And I thought I would say this at the conclusion, but I think Japan must take the leadership. As was mentioned earlier, this is rather difficult. The contribution, to be a positive contribution, it's difficult to visualize, and within an international framework, we must attract empathizers, people who sympathize with our idea. Thank you. In particular, with regard to NEC, or Daiwa House Asset Management of Tsuchida-san, by leveraging data, and in particular, as you mentioned about Scope 3, to analyze the emissions of Scope 3, there should be a contribution to the owners of the properties. You do have such a business service, so the importance of digital and data, I think, was mentioned. Later on, I will invite Mayor Fukuda about Mizonokuchi and the visualization project. But right now, I think I will invite Ms. Gozu. So for your company as an SG provider, it's a difficult environment?
Yes, things are tough for us at the moment. Recently, I feel that to do something about this domestically produced power source, we have to rely on this. If we rely on foreign sources, utility rates would be very high. In Tokyo, the situation is very bad. I think it's 40 yen. The final guaranteed rate has been reached. I think companies are paying 40 yen. So domestic power sources, that is renewable energy, we have to increase this. That is the only resort. And to do this, we need regional or local governments who will be undertaking this. We want to do this, but things are not proceeding the way we want it to. We want to think about renewable energy use, but if the cost is too high, we cannot introduce. And it's the location, whether it's solar. It's very hard to find the proper location. For example, the rooftop may not be able to hold that much weight. So there are these issues. Because you may feel that because we're in the regions, we have a lot of space, but things are more difficult. In Kochi Prefecture, we have a company. There are lots of agricultural houses, and a lot of the fuel oil is used. Heat pumps are introduced, and they use power. And we're trying to do something about it, and we're thinking hard about this. But solar panels cannot be placed on roofs because it blocks the sun. Do we have extra space? The houses are crowded in, so there's not a lot of space, and solar heat is very high. And greenhouses cannot place solar panels because it blocks the sun. So we are struggling with this, and technological innovation is absolutely necessary. There are different solar power generating devices, but if we have too much solar during the daytime, there'll be surplus power. And in the western part, I believe the weather is very good, but during the daytime, the power market is such that it's 0.1 yen. Renewable energy will be in surplus, so they will not be able to generate renewable energy source power. So storage of energy is important, and CO2 reduction. In terms of this, using CO2 to make chemical basic materials, technological innovation in this area is very active. Photosynthesis, artificial photosynthesis is proceeding in this area. And so we need to realize this very quickly. And the near future energy portfolio has to introduce this technology. We have to review this so that it includes such a technology. And that is something that I strongly feel. And local governments, as to what role they can play. The local governments have subsidies from the central government. It's easy for them to receive this. So backing up private sector technology, demonstration and field can be provided, or penetration can be promoted by local governments. And these are things that local governments need to do. And that technology must be fed to local industry in the form of local industry promotion. It may be difficult to do, but these are things I'd like to attempt to do.
Thank you. Of course, it is partly countermeasure against the climate change, but as I heard Ms. Gozu, in order to deal with the current energy crisis, how to use as much as possible the domestically produced clean renewable energy. And in that regard, the tie bonds with the local community and the leadership of the local community is very important. So thank you for all those powerful messages like Ms. Gozu and Mayor Fukuda.
Yes, what I mentioned, the regional new power utility, where did that come from? The PPS, we have 3 waste incineration plants in this region, and we're rebuilding some. This will be state of the art. And rather than waste processing, it's more like a power generating facility. And this, with this as a trigger, when we created this, green bond has been issued among the last week 15 billion, and this year 5 billion was issued, and it was 13 times. There were people who wanted to buy 70 billion, and so it was oversubscribed. Producing results, investment that generates results, have very positive outcome. I believe that kind of investment is very active now. After this, I just came from the city assembly meeting, and in the assembly meeting, increase in prices and energy price increase and countermeasures have been discussed. And there's a lot of local allocation funds from the central government. How to use this is the problem. The central government asked this to be distributed to individuals, and I strongly feel whether it's the right thing to do. As the local government, we have a menu of the things that we can do. SMEs. To introduce energy conservation facilities, solar power generation or storage. We want to have them invest in these. And we want to allocate subsidies for this purpose. And that is how we want to use money. And that is why we created the menu. But the central government, this time in September, they said use several billions of yen, but it has to be used, dispersed. It has to be used before the end of the fiscal year. The budget to be passed and to be used before the end of the fiscal year is very difficult. So in the end, it ends up being distributing to individuals. These are opportunities, rather, because of these measures. We shouldn't talk about short-term issues. We want to induce funds to be used in long-term investment. And so the central government and local government must cooperate to make this happen. This is how I strongly feel. Thank you.
What you just mentioned, I'm sure that that was a strong message from you to the central government. I think it happened during the COVID-19 pandemic. In order to respond to a crisis, there are many policies that are implemented, but on a longer term basis, we must aim for a better society, and money, capital, budget must be utilized appropriately and wisely. It reminded me of the COVID pandemic government policies. So I have invited all the panelists to discuss, and I am aware, I have taken note that the Secretariat is flagging me that we are running out of time. But in fact, there were so many questions that I wanted to ask, but I think this will be the last. So what is your strongest message, most important message to the audience? That would be your final comment. But of course, if you can talk about the following items, I would be gratified. Because the policies related to climate change, companies and local government authorities, you are the leaders in our country. I think the audience will have a special expectation. They want to know what you are going to do as the next step. It's a difficult situation, but you have ambitious goals. Yourselves, local government authorities, and leading companies, what will you do as the next step? Something new? Cooperation with local community, company to company collaboration. If you can talk, please do tell us what will you do as a next step, but most importantly, your final message to the audience. Thank you. I think I have exhausted my comments, but I think what is most important is, as the country of Japan, to have a clear vision and a way of thinking is important for the country of Japan. As a state, as a country, what we want to do about global warming or about going carbon neutral. Japan as a country needs a clear vision. Japan's global competitiveness will be determined. In a sense, it is an opportunity, or in other words, it is a risk we might lose. So under this situation, NEC stands for Nippon Electric. So in the ICT region, we are proud that we are one of the information technology company and common infrastructure or technology for disaster preparedness, or how to factor these into data infrastructure and how to promote global standardization to take the lead in rules making. And with the support of the central government, we want to be a contribution to the world. Thank you. Mr. Tsuchida, President Tsuchida. The real estate, which is distribution facilities that we own, as one example of local government authority collaboration in Nagareyama City of Chiba Prefecture, we own a distribution facility. This could be used as a shelter in the case of a disaster. We have such an agreement with the city of Nagareyama. Japan suffers a lot of earthquake or typhoons. Japan is so disaster prone. The city of Nagareyama, they are beside the river of Edogawa. If the Edogawa breaks the bank, the local community and the workers who have commuted to the place, they need a shelter to escape. And so we have concluded an agreement. 1,500 persons can be accommodated and 500 persons worth of food is stocked. So this is one example of our concrete collaboration with local government authorities, and we wish to expand such public-private cooperation as a REIT. We will continue to acquire real estates. We have to grow as a company. Then the strongest advantage is the support by the sponsors. In the case of Daiwa House, we have a mid-term plan, and for all the buildings, solar panel shall be placed is our goal by 2030. It should be 100% ZEB, net zero energy building, or ZECH. The housing is ZEH, but in our case, we are aiming for 100% zero emission building. That is elaborated in our mid-term plan. The properties that we will acquire in the future, those would have been developed by sponsors by acquiring such properties to the tenants who will lease. We want them to be satisfied. We want to provide properties that will be resilient to disasters for the sake of the tenants. If we make that effort, then that would be a return to the shareholders who have kindly invested. That is my hope. Thank you so much. Then Ms. Gozu.
The next move is what you asked about. As mentioned earlier, technological innovation. I think it all boils down to this. We can't do very difficult development work. Private sector companies who are near the stage of commercialization, along together with the local government and with the regional companies, we want to back such companies up. And that is what we want to do. And to feed this into the local industry. I think it all boils down to this. That is what all that we have to do. That is my thought. Thank you. Mayor Fukuda, please. Well, bold energy transformation is what I want to say. Kawasaki City, within the region, the energy, electric power that we produce is thermal, and it's 80,000 kilowatts. For the 48 prefectures, that's 7.6 million kilowatts for a population of 40 million. So over that amount, 8 million kilowatts is what we generate. And 90% is oil derived from fossil fuels. So what we're working on is hydrogen. And we use hydrogen now. We're an area that makes most use of hydrogen. In the waterfront area, we've launched a platform, a carbon neutral industrial complex consultation committee is what we have launched. And a lot of companies have been gathered for the purpose of studying the use of hydrogen. And that's a platform. Can we do this by 2030? We may not be able to do it, but in the medium to long term, the thermal power generation, the fossil fuel generated power, we have to bring about a change here. Otherwise, within the industry, we will not succeed in decarbonization. And so in that sense, it's not only for Kawasaki City, it's for the metropolitan areas and Japan's competitiveness that we have to realize decarbonization. There's a lot of things that we can do. And with the companies and the local governments, by cooperating, I think this can be realized. Thank you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. So as I listen to the top leaders, in terms of the climate crisis, resilience is required, not only about the enterprise, but the resilience of the local community or the region, and by forward looking into the future, how to reduce the emission, as Mr. Fukuda mentioned at the end, that will determine the Japanese companies, Japanese local communities, and the country of Japan's industrial competitive edge. I think you have such clear awareness. So I hope that within JCI, this recognition can be spread further. So we have enjoyed the very meaningful discussion with our panelists. We would like to express our deep gratitude to the panelists. Professor Takamura, top leaders, thank you very much for your contribution. It was really a precious opportunity. In particular, Mayor Fukuda, about the misallocated subsidies. Many in the audience were nodding. I just wanted to tell you how much the audience was responding. And last but not least, we will invite Representative Tsuyoshi Takeshiro for the closing remarks. Are you connected, Mr. Tsuyoshi?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. Thank you very much for participating in this program for a very long time. And for those of you that have taken the stage, we'd like to thank you as well. I have been increasing my concerns about Japan as to what kind of concerns. That is the energy crisis caused by the war in Ukraine. In dealing with this energy crisis, and Japanese government is taking outdated energy policies, which takes us back to the 20th century. This is being revived, and without discerning the substance of the problem, people are trying to deal with short-term issues, and this is all déjà vu. And the industrialized countries in Europe are also looking at the future in implementing short-term measures, and they are strengthening these long-term measures. They're trying to become a 21st century leader, and they're trying to build a sustainable society. And they combine short-term, long-term policies, and the typical of this is Germany. Perhaps, as you know, in July, Germany largely revised the energy law. It's a 500-page law. It's a large, voluminous law. Natural energy use and nuclear energy, short-term measures will be taken. But this crisis will be seen as an opportunity for decarbonization. In 2030, the power and the renewable energy percentage in power will be raised from 65% to 80%. And 2035, 100% is what they're aiming for. And what I was most impressed was with the electricity minister there said, renewable energy expansion is, and Habeck has said that this is of foremost importance to the nation. And the corporate culture and a social climate which exists in Europe is what I'm envious of. Japan and Germany are pursuing completely opposite policies. In 10 years, we will be left behind in Japan, and Germany will be so ahead of us that we will not be able to see them. And to avoid this, Japan has to be serious about changing this crisis into an opportunity. Japan would have to have that will. Looking back 4 years ago in 2008, JCI started with 100 members. And when we started, there was a mixture of hope and anxiety. At the moment, the anxiety is gone, and we have a lot more hopes because JCI's new members are such that it continues to increase. So we have 724 members in JCI, and JCI's growth is such that the increase in membership proves the raison d'etre of JCI. In order to overcome this stagnation and this difficult situation, this time for once we have to become serious to do away with, to put the past behind us, and to try to pioneer the 21st century. And central to this is the Paris Agreement, realizing non-state actors gathering, which is JCI. And JCI needs to be ambitious. JCI be ambitious to try to make up for the lost 30 years. We have to be more ambitious. So once again, we hope that you will make active efforts, and I should like to conclude my words of gratitude. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tsuyoshi. This will be the end of today's program. Lastly, 2 housekeeping information from the Secretariat. Regarding the COP27 next month in Egypt, amongst the members of JCI, there will be a Japan pavilion on November 14. There will be youth organizations and youth members who are in the 2nd grade of senior high school. There is no live distribution, but on a later date, we shall report about the event and also distribute the movie of the event. Another information for all of you in this hall, you will have the opportunity to meet your fellow audience in the foyer, where you can talk, greet, exchange your business cards. Please do enjoy your exchanges. Going forward, JCI wishes to expand face-to-face in-person meetings between the member organizations, and therefore I invite your continued proactive participation. Once again, thank you for staying with us for so long. Thank you.